But, players like to fiddle with knobs. So we put all those knobs up there. My favorite thing is seeing the beta feedback. We've already seen people messing with the knobs and being like, I was a mistake.
Yeah.
Butterscotch
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 525 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth, and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam, the web programmer.
I'm Sam. This is a palindrome episode, baby.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today's June 13th. 2020 vibes. Before we get started, we have a warning. Anything could happen in this show, but mostly swear words. And then,
that's the main thing.
Probably some other topics sprinkled in there between the profanity. We'd also like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. Thank you so much for your recurring donations to help keep the podcast going. And we have a donation with a message from Holden Reg, who says, after 5 years of listening to the bros, through career changes, a move across the country, and big life changes, I figured it's time to contribute to the mic juices. I listened to the pod more than some of the streaming services I forgot to cancel. Fuck Peacock. Thanks, bros. So Peacock just catching strays here.
I love it.
I don't know.
That's great.
Just a quick drive-by, just blasting Peacock.
Also, how fun that we've been just in this person's life, through all this stuff. Fun, strange.
That's pretty cool.
That's interesting.
I think Peacock is like $10 a month. So if you were just accidentally spending that money on Peacock, you could just throw that this way.
You could just say fuck Peacock and just cancel that and just throw that our way.
If anybody wants to accidentally spend money,
this is a great place
spend
to
it
do
on us. Okay, what's good?
I learned yesterday that AT&T has been overbilling me by $20 a month for the past 5 years.
Good luck getting that money back.
So that's not coming back. That's gone. That money is gone.
I learned last week, or was that 2 weeks ago, that some rando was using my credit card to pay for their Netflix subscription for the past year. So
yeah, and the miracle is that that's all they did with it.
Yeah, it was somebody in Thailand.
Honestly, though, that's a clever. That's the way to do it.
Yeah,
because you don't set off the alarm. You get free Netflix for a year.
You still would think, though, that because credit cards are pretty good at their weird automated fraud detection stuff. You would think that they'd be like, you got this one recurring charge based in Thailand.
Admittedly, a little bit of
where you've never been,
where you've never been and currently are not, but that's somehow that's happening. And I didn't notice it because it was on my personal credit card, and we use our family credit card to pay for my household Netflix. And I was just, when I saw it on there, I was just like, oh, I must have seen this 1,000 times and just thought, oh, I guess I'm just have this on my card for some reason.
Yep, 100%.
And it wasn't until this most recent time I looked at it because there was some other weird charge, and which seems to be unrelated. And I looked at it, I was like, wait, why am I paying for Netflix on here? Then I went to go just change it because I was still assuming that I was just paying for it with the wrong card. Mm-hmm. And then I went to our account, looked it up, and I was like, this is a different credit card.
Something's off.
It was a whole thing. It was funny though when I got through customer
that's how they get you.
And got the email to give me that account that was tied to my credit card, And the email showed up in Thai, and I was like, "What the fuck? What is going on?"
Confusion.
Yeah, because the owner of the account is not you. Yeah.
So anyway, that's the thing that happened.
Yeah. So maybe take some time this weekend for listeners. Just double check some of your purchases.
Get those fucking peacocks out of here.
Make sure they are you.
Yeah. Save some money. We got a bunch of news. Spend that money at moneygrab.bscotch.net.
That's right.
Yeah. Just pass it on. Pay it forward.
Finder's
fee to us.
Yes.
So we got a bunch of news for the studio as well as some industry news. So studio news this week is that Crashlands 2 Update 1.2, the Hardcore Scramble, has entered beta on Steam. We plan on launching this update on June 24th, Tuesday, which is a couple days before the Steam Summer Sale, because we wanted to get it out before our first ever Crashlands 2 discount, so that all the new players coming in get to experience all the goodies that we've been cooking up. So we have a bunch of information in our Discord server about the patch, as well as a way for you to get into the Steam beta channel, which is password protected because, hey, it's beta. Shit might break. We want to make sure people opt into that experience on purpose. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about what's in this patch. Okay, so it's been 5 weeks since we released patch 1.1. And in that 5 weeks,
just run it down. Just go real fast.
All right,
it's a lot.
So we've added a new mutator system which includes the scramble mode that we talked about a few episodes back, and hardcore mode. And you can activate both of those at the same time, which is why we call it the patch, the hardcore scramble. We've got a whole new creature that we added to the Aqua Dunes called the Swoggle, which is like a laser piranha cat kind of a thing.
Standard.
Yep. Which that can also be raised as a pet. We added 2 additional pets, which are robots. So you can reprogram some of the robots that you come across and have them alongside you. We did a bunch of map expansions. We made the map a lot bigger. We added lots of quality of life shit. We added an armor recrafting skill system so that you like have a better chance of making epic or legendary armor items
This is because
as you craft more of them.
Patch made it so that you could basically get
random stats.
So basically, the last patch gave you an incentive to recraft stuff, but then that gets less fun the more you have to recraft something. So then now this patch,
because it's just the same chance every time.
This patch gives you an extra bonus as you're recrafting stuff.
Yeah, and we'll be probably continuing to expand on the armor customization side of things in the next patch, but this was kind of like the next step in that. We also added a bunch of base building items, so now you can use the kind of like more metallic-y Bureau of Shipping style buildings in your own base. You can craft those and use those. We added a bunch of new dock styles, a bunch of rare statues you can get from hunting the biggest creatures in the world.
Yeah, that was the one when I was reading through the patch notes where I was like, yeah, I know everything that's in here because, I'm part of the team. Hear people talk about stuff. And I saw that picture of the statue before I read the thing about the statues, and I was like, the fuck is that?
What is that?
I had no idea that was in there.
Anne was cooking on those.
They're awesome.
They're pretty cool. And they're expensive to craft because, you get their trophies basically.
Cool factor.
Worth it. And as Sam was saying, we also have garden docks, which is a big request. So you can like plant your plants out over the water. A lot of people will miss that because they're variations of the current dock. So you'll have to kind of like, you can swap the style with the little arrows in the recipe.
Is it a variation of the dock or is it a variation of the garden bed?
Sorry, it's a variation of the garden bed. Yeah. So we have that. And weirdly, like the thing that I'm personally the most excited about is the compound roll-up system, which this is so like a lot of the items in Crashlands 2 are made out of things that you also craft.
So we call those compounds, which are like, if you want to make some glue, you take some, hooves and you take some other stuff.
Some horses.
Take some horses, chop the legs off, take the hoof, do some other stuff to it. Now you got glue. So we do that. And we use those then as like from an economy perspective to make it so that, resources that are coming from previous tiers in like the world remain a viable thing that you still want to be harvesting kind of for a while longer after their initial early usage, right? So you roll them up, become roll-ups internally. You roll them up.
Well, in a weird way, like it feels weird to just keep using, say, like the leaves that you were using at early game throughout the entire first act. But if you roll those leaves up into a new thing, like the fiber that you unlock, then it feels right for some reason. But it's hard. Like there's a cognitive load to having to then like craft the components of something and then also craft the thing. Because then it's like, how many of this can I actually make? And then there's multiple manual steps, and it makes the recipe tracking a little bit hard to understand. So we just kind of took some time to figure that out. And so now when you're tracking a recipe, it'll tell you actually how many of that thing you can make, including the subcomponents that you haven't yet crafted, because it knows how many you could craft. And it also, in the crafting page, it'll automatically craft those subcomponents for you. So you basically
actually don't ever have to manually craft.
You don't have to worry about fucking around with those compounds. And the funny thing about this was when we added this, it revealed a few like way out of whack, fucked up recipes.
We've done a few audits before lunch and I think with 1.1 on some economy stuff where we noticed where there were some player complaints about like some things being too costly, because usually what it was actually just because the compounds obfuscate exactly what is going into a recipe, then it was and they're happening around the same time as that resource being largely available anyways, then oftentimes you would have the case of a double dipping where you'd be like, okay, yeah, this compound uses some horse hooves, for example. Also, the thing uses horse hooves. So you got compound with the horse hooves in it, plus also we need more horse hooves for this particular thing. And now
you're making your horse hoof helm and it requires horse hooves and glue.
Yep, exactly.
But you already had to use hooves to make the glue, and now you got to spend twice as many hooves to make this fucking thing.
So they're only like maybe 4 or 5 that we missed, but it's just this sort of thing where like those are exactly, we try to get all of them out before launch, like we did a big audit of it, and it's exactly the sort of thing where it's like not a problem until it's a problem. You know what I mean? Especially as we got into the recrafting, I think in particular with the 1.1 update. That basically compounded it even further, right? Because previously it was one of the things like it wouldn't matter that much if we fucked it up on like armor.
If you're making something one time,
right? So you'd be like kind of annoyed by whatever, but as soon as you want to recraft it and it turns out that we double dipped on it, then it sucks a lot. So
it's expensive as fuck. Well, and it's like because of the roll up problem, it's just very difficult to tell what the hell's going on. Like you're like, oh yeah, I want to make more of this armor, but it's made out of 2 compounds. And I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah. So when I'm tracking it in my recipe tracker and I'm out harvesting materials, I have no idea how many of this thing I can make.
Yeah. Or you get tricked, right? Because if it's like you got hooves and glue and then you're like, oh, fuck, I gotta go get some hooves. So you got to get hooves. You already know you don't have enough glue, right? But you get, or maybe you do have enough glue, but you go get some hooves. You're like, oh, I think finally I've got enough hooves now, right? And so then you go back and then you
craft your glue.
And then you go to craft the glue and then it uses those hooves. And you're like, God damn it. Now you
don't have enough hooves. Yeah. So that's all fixed now. Yeah. It's just so much slicker. And this is one of those like parts of the patch that's definitely going to fly under the radar because of all of the much flashier kinds of things. But it really changes the feel of being like, tracking a recipe, getting out in the world and like collecting your materials because you can fucking see that you can make it.
I think there's also another thing we did where it was just I think just an interesting ramification from having the hardcore scramble mode stuff. So the intent with the hardcore scramble, one is of course to bring back hardcore from the original game had the hardcore mode, right? So of course we wanted to have some more parity there. But
it was like when you die, you're done.
Yeah, you're fully done. You get a score. Yeah, it's kind of the same deal. So that's largely the same. But then what's interesting about it in the context of Crashlands 2 is that once you are doing that kind of roguelike mode and you're dying a bunch, that means you're repeating that opening sequence also a bunch. And so what we did, especially in the last like 2 weeks or so, and a lot actually in the last just couple of days, was just like really trying to refine the shit out of that opening sequence to remove a few of those like walking about moments where the player, like previously, was, you walk to the cabin, you walk up to Juice Box, you walk back down to Grawl, you get your machete, you walk back up, you chop Juice Box out, you walk back down to Grawl, talk to him, and then you walk over to the dock guy, and you walk back. It's like we chopped out actually.
Yeah, the opening of the game was a lot of talk to somebody, walk, talk to somebody else, walk back, talk to somebody, walk back, talk to somebody, walk back.
Yeah, and so it's like if we'd already done a bunch of that work pre-launch, and again from the numbers, it's not one of those things where like it doesn't seem to have a tremendous impact on player drop off for that first little chunk, right? Like we still keep people around, but it's been my suspicion that that's one of those things that like as players are getting, how long it takes them to get like into the full loop of things, you know what I mean? Like it just delays that by potentially 10 minutes sometimes, depending on how the player plays, 15 minutes, whatever else. And so, with all this, we made just a ton of changes there. It's like you're getting a weapon now. Grawl just gives you a weapon, which I forgot about. There's like the overall sequence there is shorter. Just the whole thing is way faster. And then just yesterday we added unarmed movement to Flux, so the player is just 10% faster.
Unarmored.
Sorry, unarmored. Yeah, unarmed. If you're carrying a weapon. Unarmored movement. So if you got no armor on, which is just how you are at the beginning, then you just have like a baseline bonus to move speed per armor piece you're missing. And then that basically fades off at the same time that other things are, turning on. So run speed boost you're getting from fusions or weapons or whatever. Yeah.
So it's like every empty armor. So you have 4 armor slots and each empty one contributes 2.5% move speed. So yeah. So you just got this, because like a lot of what you're doing in early game is, you're exploring the world, navigating, going out harvesting stuff, and because you don't have your armor, you're running away from shit a lot, and whatever. And so like being able to move a little quicker early game is great. And then, like Sam was saying, you gain move speed from other sources as you get gear. So it just kind of like trades it out a bit.
You really don't notice. You really don't notice that it's dropping off, which is fun.
Yeah. But a big part of that too is like if you're playing in hardcore and you get a little ways into the game and you do have a full set of armor, you got some trinkets, you got some infusions, and maybe you're chilling at like 15 or 20% run speed, and then you die. And so you start a new hardcore run, and now you're like, oh my God. I'm slow as fuck.
Yeah, so it was really interesting. Like, it's like an interesting. I don't know if it's a useful design paradigm to think about for tutorials and stuff. But it's almost like if you have a game that isn't like a roguelike, isn't permadeath related, and you act as if it is, right? So you just like play for a while, and whenever you die, restart, have to yourself, then go through the tutorial a bunch, or like that opening sequence. I think it's a good way to find refinements for it, frankly, because it made us we did like a lot of collapsing of stuff to make that whole thing just kind of faster, to get you into the gameplay a little bit faster, which I think people would like a lot.
Yeah, and as always, you got to find that balance, right? Of like, as you're doing it abnormally, right? Because a regular player going through the tutorial won't do it 100 times in a row, and so you gotta find that balance point. But there's a good chance that for the tutorial, you went too hard towards walking the player through it carefully, right?
Yep.
And so it's a good way to find ways to pull that back. I think there are also some other changes in Scramble and Hardcore, right? To like some parts of quests and stuff to streamline some more things.
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of dialogue. Jen went in and basically we added some toggles on the game changer side to make it so that we could essentially like turn off or on parts of dialogues. There's some of those early conversations are basically truncated, have some like kind of funky, fourth wall break stuff going on about like, I feel like I've been here before sort of vibe. So there's like a fun little twist in it.
Yeah. And like all the tutorials are disabled. So, we don't like force you to open your map or like look at your quest log or tell you what a gem is, Yep. So there's a lot of things that are enslickened in that way. And I think, also we have a custom game mode.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you want a creative mode from the original, this is part of the idea here, is a combination of creative mode in the original, I think was just like, you just like had stuff.
You just like had,
it was
you
just
flew
around
sandbox,
and you had, right? It was basically like
you had infinite building materials.
But there's no quest or anything. So you weren't like, it's not like you're playing the game, but with like more build capability. So we took it a little bit differently this time, which is just to say that you can, with the custom mode, you could basically just set building costs to as close to zero as possible. So it's like, if you just want to build like a shitload of stuff, you could just, do that. But then it comes with all these other bells and whistles, which like, again, we balanced it on purpose. We think it's like balanced pretty freaking good, but
balance makes the game.
Yeah. But players like to fiddle with knobs. So we put all those knobs up there. My favorite thing is seeing the beta feedback. We've already seen people like, messing with the knobs and being like, I was a mistake.
Yeah.
Just great.
Yeah. But it's adjustable. Faster. It's adjustable on the fly. So like
it's pretty fun.
When you make your save in custom, you preset the sliders to whatever you want. And there's sliders like how much do base building items cost, but also how fast does the player run? How fast do enemies move? How fast do enemies attack? How much health do you have? Like all these different things that can not just make the game like a little bit more challenging, but also just completely break it in a variety of ways. You can set your own run speed to like 10%. Mm-hmm. I don't know why you would do that, but you can do it, if you want to. And so there's just all these crazy things, but then once you start playing, if you're like, well, this fucking sucks, you could just pop open those sliders and just change them during gameplay, and everything just adjusts in real time. So, so there's just no risk, and we do allow you to earn hardcore points in custom, but just the lowest possible amount of points because.
Because each difficulty has a multiplier on top of the points.
Every difficulty is double the previous one of points. But
custom, it was like Seth could have sat down and been like, okay, so this slider is worth, X fraction of a multiplier, depending on where it is or whatever. But like,
it's a combinatorial problem.
It's too complicated. So
that means there might be like a perfect combination of sliders that's actually easier than legend mode a little bit, but then you get a little bit more points for it. Yeah. And so like, I didn't want to open up that.
That's not the game.
Stupid min-maxing thing.
We also have those scramble seeds we added. So like you can actually put a, type of word in to use that as your basis for randomization for your scramble run. So that means that you can share them, which is fun. I just saw some people swapping them in the Steam in our beta thing.
So if you get if you go like Seth did yesterday, where he got one of the new robot pets right out of the gate, Like that's a pretty good seed, you know. Especially if you want to like if you've already played the game.
And I did post the seed because I fucking died like right after I hatched my pet, and then I posted my my death screen because I just got cocky around an ampy charger, and that was that.
But you were playing it hardcore. You can still use that same seed without playing it hardcore.
Yeah, the seed still works on non-hardcore scramble.
Yeah, regular scramble.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think it's one of those things where it is funny. Seth, you mentioned like it's been 5 weeks, and we talked a lot about like we did so much investment in Crashlands 2. The first basically the first whole half of development was just all this stuff to figure out not just what the game was, but also then simultaneously all the tooling to make it possible to parallelize so much of the work. And it is really funny. And so there's a tragedy in a sense, right? Where it's like you launch the game. And like we'd only really, really like full power been able to utilize all of those tools that we made for about a year, right?
Yeah.
We made 2/3 of the game in that time. But like just that last year dev was the full speed ahead thing. And it's I don't know, it's like fascinating to me that like then we go do one of these patches and this update it's just so big that it's ridiculous actually, right? In terms of how much stuff is in there in such a short order, And it is a testament to like all the tools we built. Like all this stuff is so parallelized that we can just be flinging it in, boom, 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 just like a machine gun. I mean,
essentially it's like at this point it's like 9 weeks or whatever since the launch, and we've already wrapped up 2 major patches.
Yeah, major patches, right? And it's like,
what if you compare
the only reason that
Crashlands
this patches,
the first patch was the quality of life patch, right? Which I think launched in like the summer, didn't it? Wasn't it like?
It was like 5 months or 5 or 6 months or something.
Yeah, it was almost half a year after the.
It took a while, but also it was just adding stuff like resolution.
Yeah.
So like different resolutions.
We added like 3 items, I think 3 items total.
It wasn't. It just was not at this scale. So I mean, it's cool that we're able to do all this stuff. But yeah, it does mean like the reason we did all this tooling was we wanted to move our bottlenecks because it's like it shouldn't be hard to get stuff into the game.
Yeah,
that shouldn't be where it's slow. Actually, I mean, ideally it shouldn't be slow anywhere, right? But it's going to be some part of the process is always going to be the slowest part. And so now the slowest part is literally just kind of like coming up with what's going to go into the game, and then.
It's the physical making of it,
creating the audio, creating the visual assets and the animations and stuff like that. That's basically the bottleneck at this point.
It's the whole idea of trying to make things self-service, right? Is meaning it's within your control, right? And the moment it's not within your control, then the bottleneck is somewhere else. Then you just don't get to decide how long it takes, what you should be doing, all that kind of stuff. It's all dictated by something external, and so that motivating force is basically saying we want development of the game to be self-service for everybody involved. So if you want to do something, you can do the thing, right? And
you can put it in the game.
Yeah, and we got there, or at least very, very close.
Yeah, but it's funny. It's like it's funny to be there, in total scale of the game, right? Because we had to do so much learning and stuff, right, to figure out how to do this, then to actually execute it. It's funny that like in the scale of the total experience of making the game, this update it's been very fun to put together. You know what I mean? Because like.
Yeah, because we just get to play with all the toys we made.
Yeah, the terror of launch is over. Like everything's fine, and then it's like, and now we can just sail. But like, it's also, I don't know. There is a bittersweetness sort of emerging for me about it because it's like we will at some point move on, and like the tooling stack isn't going to be 100% there for whatever we're doing next. Like we're gonna have to do something, or not, depending.
Yeah, well, it's also tightly integrated with Crashlands 2 and built for purpose, at least to an extent, right? Because they're fairly general tools, but they were built to solve the problems that Crashlands 2 presented. And so they're still, kind of Crashlands focused. And other games will have different problems. They'll have a lot of the same problems too, right? But the shape and the scale and complexity of the problems are just different.
The details are costly in terms of like getting it all, entangled. But I think it's I don't know. It's funny. It's like you get the thing out, and then now we got like sort of an expiration on just like how long we're going to work on it, of course, before we move on. We're going to do another big update, but I don't know, who knows what's going to happen after that. But it's one of the, I don't know. It's just funny to think about. It's like all that work so we could make the game really fast. We did all that, get the game out, and then it's like, well, it's time to move on. And it's like, but we had such a
But like the only reason
it would be,
but the only reason it would be time to move on is because the tools allowed us to update the game so quickly and resolve all of the things and like do all the stuff that we wanted to do. That's
true.
Without them, we would have had to been spending the next year and a half on these updates.
Actually,
right?
well, no, these updates wouldn't have happened because the game did fine, but it didn't do so well that we could afford to spend another year on it, right?
Yeah. So we would have just had to leave it.
Yeah, we would have stopped where we are and just said, well, the Crashlands 2 is what it is because we cannot afford to make it anything else.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's our goal is always like make the game like when we launch it, it's like this is the game that is our vision, but once it's launched, it's now the player's game. Right.
So you got to share the vision.
Yeah. And so as we get all the feedback and hear all the things that people want to see and get out of the game, which of course that list never ends, but there's always like a predominant kind of theme, consensus about like, I wish this game had X or Y or Z. Once we've addressed all those things, then it's time to start making the next game, and because of the game changer and all that, then we're able to do that. And so we definitely have at least one more major patch after patch 1.2.
And we'll see how the summer sale goes too, because it's our first discount for it. Crashlands 2 is priced in that higher premium tier. We got a bunch of wish lists, so we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think none of us think that we've sort of saturated the Crashlands 2 market. I think we're all confident that there's still a huge visibility and awareness problem because we still have literally every day someone's like, oh, I wish I knew this game was coming out, right? Like every day, it's like we've done everything that we could possibly do that's within our control to let people know it exists. But it's pretty clear that,
and we're always doing more.
But it's pretty clear that like there's still a huge possible available market out there that the game hasn't gotten into, and so this is just the nature of launching any kind of entertainment product or any kind of product. Period. Right? It's can you get it to everybody who would want it? And the answer is always no. But even though they're there, that doesn't mean we'll still find a way to get them. So we just have to.
Yeah, I mean, the dream scenario is like the Terraria one, right? Where like you launch a game and then just every 3 or 4 months, you just release an update and you can just do that
for the rest
for like
of the time.
a decade. And you just somehow keep making more and more money. But if it lands in like the good but not absolute breakout success tier, then at some point, well, you got to launch another game. You gotta. So, but we are still working on Crashlands 2. We plan on working on it for quite a while yet. So, so very excited for this patch. And again, that patch is coming out on June 24th. If you want to get into the Steam beta to get an early taste of it, then just hop on into the Bscotch Discord at discord.gg/Bscotch. And there's a bunch of information in there about it. So in terms of industry news,
what do we got?
Basically just 2 big things. One is the Switch 2 release happened. We were joking last week about how everybody was like, oh, it's so expensive. I'm never going to buy it. And then everybody on earth bought it. That's what happened.
I think it's very important to separate online discourse from, people who touch grass. And it's just, they're just different. So you get that.
Yeah. Well, and there's a FOMO. Like if you fear of missing out, right? If you and your buddies are big Nintendo fans, right? And like one of you has the means to buy the Switch, then the rest of you are going to find the means to buy the Switch because your buddy's over here playing the new Mario Kart game and telling you how awesome it is. And you're like, damn it. Fine. So
I think it's also just that just 2 things can be true at the same time, right? People can be mad about how much it costs and buy it.
And still pay for it. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And they're mad about it because they want it.
Yeah, because that's how much it costs. You know, like that's. Yeah. I mean, like I've never been happy about about the expensive part of expensive purchase.
Right. Nobody wants to give up their money.
Yeah.
And so like I had no opinions about the price because I wasn't planning on buying one. I'm more of a PC gamer, more so than a console gamer. And also just that, if you buy the Switch, you then on its own, you can't do anything with it. You now got to spend another 80 and then another 80 and another 80 to get a few games to play on it. And I don't have
your back catalog
existing library. Yeah, but I don't have really an existing one. Right. Other than like Rocket League and a couple other games, but then like my Rocket League progress from Steam didn't carry over to the Switch. So, I don't know. But yeah, so like I'm not yet kind of like captured by the Nintendo Switch ecosystem. So it's a much bigger wall for me. But if you've been an active Switch player and one or two of your friends start playing it, and it's just like, yeah, I mean, you don't want to miss out. So people are going to buy it. But that means that it's been the fastest selling console in history. 3.5 million units sold in its first 4 days. So
very cool.
Pretty good. I think the current Switch has sold like 150 million or something by now since 2017.
150 million units?
Yeah, something like that.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah,
which I think is similar to PS5, right?
I'm not sure. This is something that's been bothering me about this is, hey, journalists, what are you doing? Because I keep opening articles.
General question.
I keep opening articles and I'll be like, Nintendo Switch sold a crazy number of units. That's the headline, and I open it and then it's like I'm scrolling past 43 ads and then they're like, here's how many units the Switch sold. That's it. That's the whole fucking article. I'm like, give me some context. Yeah. What did PlayStation do? Is that how much better is it? I got to read 16 different articles now I'm the journalist. I do want to say I'm piecing together everything.
There is something interesting happening though, which I think I guess like from an overall framing angle and something like that feels like an absolute coup from the Steam Deck, which is that a lot of the articles that I've seen come out about how Switch is selling so well are comparing it to the Steam Deck. Which is actually crazy in terms of like if you think about like the distance 5 years ago, right? Between like Valve, any non-Nintendo, non-PlayStation, non-Xbox console.
I think of Steam Deck as an absolutely niche gaming console.
Yes. But what's interesting to me is like it's coming up in these articles, these conversations as a like, well, like, Nintendo's look how many, like it's so outsold because basically it's sold more units more already in 4 days than like Steam Decks exist, right?
Yeah, which is not surprising.
Which is not surprising, but also like how far has Steam been able to move?
Yeah, how they've mainstreamed it in the zeitgeist, right?
Yeah, does that make sense? Where it's like we got people comparing these two things, and it's like the fact that Steam has actually entered the conversation at all is such a fucking win. And it's a subtle one that if you're not paying attention, you'd be like, oh yeah, well, whatever. I guess they just like got their ass kicked, but their ass is visibly being kicked. You know what I mean? Like it's not the case where no one's aware that
nobody cared.
Yeah, I think
there's a difference between not being talked about at all and being talked about in terms of like how much poorly you're doing, right? Compared to something else.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a huge gap between those two things of success, right?
So the idea that like basically what that says to me is that there's at least in the mainstream, like on like the games media side of things, a very different kind of awareness about where the Steam Deck sits now, which is like it is compared to a fucking Nintendo Switch, which is crazy. Again, like it sounds obvious, but also like what a win. Who's been able to do that? Who's been able to break into the console space? You know what I mean? No one, literally no one. And it's like Steam's just appearing like a little ghost in the background,
They got a toehold.
Yeah, I don't know. Fascinating.
Yeah, I've always felt like I would like to have a Steam Deck that's much more beefy. Not in terms of size, but in terms of power, Yeah,
I'm just waiting a couple of years, basically.
Because it's like I got all these
an HD fucking screen.
Please. Yeah, give me a 1080p screen and give me some real power behind this device. Just because, like, I got a library of PC games on Steam.
Yeah, you don't have a library of Switch games on Steam or mobile games on Steam,
and like a lot of indie games are great on Steam Deck, but a lot of them are made in stuff like Unreal Engine, and they're not so great on the Steam Deck.
Yeah, well, so many of them take advantage of the fact that they're just small games in terms of content, and so they just make no effort whatsoever because they're like, well, we're on PC, people have infinite hard drives and infinite RAM, and the game's not that big, but we don't have to optimize jack shit because relative to the space we can go occupy, dude, who even cares? Yeah, so you get these like, I'm always blown away when I download really any game on Steam, but especially like I'll just go grab some fun indie title that's like 5 to 10 gigabytes or 20 even. And I'm like, what? Where
is that going?
What's in here?
Yeah, that's something that's always like, because we don't make 3D games. Yeah. So I think Crashlands 2 is like 250 megabytes or 300 megabytes or something like that.
That's very small.
And we've got like 40 music tracks in this thing and like 700 something sound effects and like 1,500 sprites and
like 40 to 60 hours of gameplay. Like,
yeah, and I'm like
a lot.
And the thing is, like, we're not making any effort to optimize the file size of the game.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's like 300 megabytes. I'm like, what is going on with these 3D games? Are 3D models really that? They're just a collection of points.
They actually send the whole thing. It's actually a physical model that gets put in the device. Yeah. That's why it's so expensive.
They compress it down.
Yeah. It takes up a
it's
lot
like
of space.
2 gigabytes per model.
Yeah, it's using basically like,
that.
Star Trek teleporter technology, but instead of having it reappear somewhere physically, we intercept the bits that are flying through the air, and you're just holding on to that. So
so
it's
you got
a
like a
full
real object
atom per atom
I
representation of.
Yes,
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we're in 2D because that sounds like a lot.
That is too much.
Sounds like a lot of work. And otherwise, WWDC happened this week, which we had a pretty cool little mention when they were talking about their new games
app.
Mm-hmm.
I assume it's just called Games, probably.
Games.
Yep.
That'd be the Apple way of doing things. Yep.
Which is it's kind of like a new way of handling the Game Center stuff, which is like it's not a game store. You still buy the games through the App Store.
Well, no, it is. You can buy them through there.
Oh, you buy them through there. Okay.
Yeah. I would think about it. To me, it's like it's basically a games focused and completely. I mean, it's not like the App Store. It's a game store. Right. But it pulls all the metadata and stuff from the App Store side of things.
Or you can think of it, it's an alternate,
it's an
alternate app store, right? In terms of like how you experience it, just with a subset of apps, which is games, and then game related features within that store. So it's basically another interface into the back end of what makes the App Store work.
And I think it is important, and I'm hoping it's a step in the right direction for them, because the reality is that, as they've experienced, games they're a very different thing. If you really want to sell them well, having to sell them also within the confines of like a storefront that treats a podcast the same as them, or a song,
a meditation app.
Yeah. It's like, it gets really weird because there's so much stuff. It's like, it's the reason Steam doesn't do that. Steam doesn't like sell songs. I mean, it does, but like as DLCs, like not like
soundtracks.
Yeah. It's all mixed in. So I think
you can technically sell software.
You sell almost anything.
Yeah. Almost nobody does, because anytime they've tried it, they're like, because Steam took no effort of any kind to be like, okay, well, what should we do to make it so that you can sell software successfully?
Yeah, they're not surfacing it.
They don't. Yeah, they do nothing to surface it, because they're like, yeah, you can if you want, but that's it, right? Because they correctly saw you can't do both at the same time.
Yeah, so my hope is that with the Games app, then, because it's basically a Games app store, that they're able to do more to actually have more discovery mechanisms and stuff in place. And it looks like at launch, it already has a couple of things that like the App Store just doesn't do. It's got much better like recommendation stuff, much better social stuff. Still no wish list though, which I am bummed about, and I've sent them a note about, but we'll see. We'll see if they
having like the ability to make announcements to players, strike through pricing for sales, and wish lists. Like if those are our 3 items. It's like if we just had those, we might be able to start moving some units on mobile.
Well, but it's those and the ability for paid games to get surfaced to regular players. Yeah, and so that's the one, because if the store just can't do that, then you need all those other things for just conversion rates, right? But you still have to send all the traffic there yourself. People have to already know it exists somehow through some of their means before they can find it. So my worry is still that since the App Store has been about free-to-play games, I mean, it's not really been about games, but what it has been, it's about free-to-play, my worry is still that this is cool. Like, this is cool for games as a category, but if they're still thinking about games the way they always have, which is not that much.
It's about monetization.
It's about monetization. Then it's just going to be it's going to be a place where you can look at all the free to play games, where.
Yeah. And this is like Google and Apple both have this approach, right? Because I'll never forget when we were at GDC and we spoke to an Apple rep, a Google rep at one point. And we were like, we were talking about our upcoming game that we were working on at that time. I can't remember which one it was.
I think it was Levelhead.
Was it?
It would have been Levelhead, yeah.
Could have been, yeah. But we were like, so we got this game. We were wondering if we could sit down and show it to somebody and kind of chat about some potential featuring or whatever. And immediately the guy just turns and he's like, well, what's your projected DARPU? Which is daily average revenue per user. And I was like, well, you buy it. So I guess it would depend how long you play. You know, like if you buy the game for $10 or whatever.
Yeah, they don't have a lot of reasoning capacity when the game isn't free to play, unfortunately. They got like no mental
looks. Because they only want to promote something that is maximizing its DARPU, daily average revenue per user.
Yeah, well, even because we did pre-registration for Crashlands 2 on Google Play, right? And even that was like so clearly designed for free-to-play games.
Designed for free-to-play, yeah.
Because the way that like that's shown to the user is confusing because it doesn't tell them that it's going to cost them something at some point, right?
Yeah.
It implies because there's also like an auto download when it appears, sort of like conveyance.
Which you can't do if you haven't bought it.
You can't do if you haven't bought it, but if it's a free-to-play game, that would just happen, right? And then what we see on the back, like we see almost no information on the back end of like who these players are, do they convert, and once you've gotten through that system, like once the game is out, basically pre-registration is a phase before launch. It's not a wish list. It's not a wish list system, right?
Yeah, it's not a way of planting a flag in your interest in a title, sort of.
Yeah. So then basically if you don't get it at launch, then it's basically gone. Like there's no reference to it anymore. And Google Play does have a bookmark system. I've bookmarked the thing before, but then nothing ever happened, and I couldn't figure out where my bookmarks were, and so then that's
so we're still. I mean, we're still looking forward to some of those things, but as I mentioned, we got that little shout out on there where as they're doing their big games thing, they like toggle through a few of these basically UI screens of what the new games app looks like, and Crashlands 2 is right on there because that box art's fucking good. Yep. Props to Eric Hibbler because God. That man could cook. So big thanks to him because I know they've loved it since they saw it. Every time I'd be texting with one of the App Store guys and they'd be like, "Art's so good! Oh my God, we got to put it on." So we didn't know this was happening, so we were very surprised to see it there.
There was a few other screenshots we saw from WWDC 2 where you'd like it wasn't about Crashlands 2 at all, but you would see like below the fold, you would see like the top of our box art, because you could tell it's iconic,
or the Crashlands 2 icon kind of floating somewhere. So that's been a pretty cool feather in our cap. We never had that kind of like, like they didn't mention the game by name or whatever, but like just the fact that it kind of flashed up for a little bit.
It isn't.
WWDC was pretty cool.
This is one of those, we think about them as prestige things. So prestige, the internal joke of prestige is basically that it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't move the needle on anything in terms of
if you get an Oscar, nobody sure.
Right. But
it doesn't change.
But you can use it. You can use it as like a little conversational point with like certain kinds of audiences, right? So like I posted about this on my LinkedIn because like
awards are business to business, right?
Exactly. They're B2B stuff. Yeah. Consumers don't notice or cares. Like it's not like we saw like an uptick that day. You know what I mean? Like there's not like a sudden rush of awareness because Apple showed us for like 6 seconds during WWDC. That's not what's happening. But it's just
no noticeable change in sales.
No noticeable change. But it is a fun feather in the cap that we can point to every so often. So one of those.
And otherwise, the WWDC it was all about their new liquid glass interface, which it's fine. I mean,
cool, sure,
looks pretty cool. Yep. All right, let's get into some questions. Questions come from our listeners over at podcast.bscotch.net. Highest upvoted question comes from PureKnix, who says, on a wild weekend in Vegas, Adam gambles away the IP to the Bscotch universe.
Oh my God, Adam, what have you done?
I also love this idea because it's sort of like
you go to a craps table and you're like,
but it's not even that. It's the idea that like that's a thing that's possible. It's the whole like I declare bankruptcy thing. It's like the idea that I could go and just be like, hey, I bet you this IP that I own.
The intellectual property rights to this.
It's like pink slips for a car.
Yeah, with like this weird non-binding contract in the context of a casino. Like how does this is why
you got to have pre-written the contract and then you slap it down on the crash.
This is why enforcement goes through kneecap breaking rather than through the legal system.
Yeah, it's just less complicated that way.
It actually is.
So Adam gambles away the IP to the Bscotch universe. You must now create a new setting for your games. What is this setting? What components of a setting make a good backdrop for video games? I'm gonna say we will find it as we go, just as we did the first time.
Yep. It's whatever you need, and then if you feel like tying it together as you make multiple things, then that's where you start finding some threads to pull on, But
because realistically, what would happen is we would just make the first game, and then if there's stuff to pull on that for the next game, then we would kind of
just roll it in.
Yeah, roll it in a little bit, which is good. That's how we did it the first time because there was absolutely no plan,
correct,
of any sort, right? And even like when we first launched stuff like Flop Rocket and
Quadrupus Rampage.
Any of these, right? We didn't initially think of them as being the same space. It was Crashlands that when we started making Crashlands, we needed a bigger space. We needed a more coherent story. We needed a universe for it to live in. And we already had all this other stuff, and we just thought it'd be fun and cool, especially because we wanted to have these like cross game perks and stuff too, right?
Yeah, a lot of it was because of the cross game perks.
Yeah, so we wanted the games to interact with each other in some kind of a way, because that's what we were trying to accomplish at that time. And so,
but I mean, it did connect, because like Talify 2, Grubby comes forward into Quadrupus Rampage, and then the enemies are the same.
Well, guess what I'm saying is like it didn't connect.
It happened to.
It was only backward looking.
Yes,
like we just like as everything we made, we were like, what can we pull from previous games into this, and we'll just try to make it make sense as we go.
Yeah,
and like you end up with like plenty of I don't know, like incoherent stuff on the side, but that also happens if you're trying to plan everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
so why waste time?
Whatever.
If you've watched any long form, or long running TV show, at some point, because if you're watching it, like those things when they happen, there's like weeks and weeks and weeks apart, so you see the whole thing. You just forget so much, right? But if I've been like catching up on a few shows that I either never watched all of or just haven't watched for a long time, and now it's in a much more compressed timeline. And as things are happening, I'm like, what? Like, we just settled this thing like a season ago. But like, if I was experiencing that as a writer of the show or as a viewer when it came out, those would have been like 2 years apart or whatever, right? But for me, they were like a few days apart, and it's impossible, no matter how good somebody is, given like a volume of work, to like actually keep track of it.
Keep it all
coherent.
Yeah. And oftentimes, like actually, a lot of the weird stuff that you accidentally do, and I think it's where the gameplay stuff for me, because the mechanical aspect of things, like what becomes fun, is always what takes precedent over like broader universe coherency. So, for example, like with Levelhead, we had when we were developing post launch what's the one, like the occultist one? What do we call that one?
Oh, the power was the Void.
The Void update?
Yeah, in the Void update. But what's the power up called? I can't remember what it's called. The distance.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I can't remember.
Jesus Christ.
The Eye of something? Or
I think it was just the Void Rune or something.
Whatever. But basically, so we had this idea for like a mechanic there, right? Which was this weird teleporty nonsense. And so it starts mechanic first, and then we're like, okay, how do you layer
what's a fun theme or vibe
theme in that like enhances that and also explains it and fits in universe, right? And so it always goes that way for us. And
but even in this case, like we very specifically didn't fit it in the universe, right? Because like the Void update was like, there's another universe that's coming into this one, right?
Yeah, right.
And so because there's like,
and that ended up in Crashlands 2 as like a major theme.
Yeah, pulled through, not planned, but pulled through.
But also like if you think about like Woe Nope didn't exist until Crashlands. Yep. Yet all the games prior to Crashlands took place on Woe Nope.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Which we
I guess like Quadrupus Rampage and Talify. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like we never mentioned the word Woe Nope, none of that stuff. And then like the Bureau of Shipping also only appeared in Crashlands. And like we had, I think as we were developing Crashlands, that's when we made Flop Rocket, where we had the Bureau of Science, and then we made Roid Rage.
Which we conceived of as basically these like twin sort of massive, organizations. But now kind of like the way that we think of it is that the Bureau of Science, like, was the origin of the Bureau of Shipping. Like there's the progression that way, right? Yeah. But it's also not, even that's not like settled.
Not settled.
This is also when people ask us questions about, they'll ask us some like little question or something. Yeah. And we're just like, but we're not going to give you an answer to that. Because
everything's amorphous until it's in a game,
And even then, still pretty amorphous.
Yeah. And so so we talk about what setting would we have? And it's like, well, I mean, our first game was like this infinite maze roguelike kind of a style thing. And our second game was this like underwater brawler kind of a thing, which are two completely different settings. And then we just later were like, yep, that was on the same planet, And so whatever we do next, it would probably come out the same way, which is like, we'll just make whatever game seems fun to make. And then we'll come up with the setting as more things kind of.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things is, and I think we didn't really do this early because we were just making sort of like whatever we could make. But now, like we mentioned with the Levelhead thing, like once you find a mechanic that you want to build out on, or a game loop and shape you want to build out, it is really like one of my favorite things now is thinking about and trying to find like a nice unifying theme, right? That like
the package Levelhead came from the fact that it was a Bureau of Shipping themed platformer. And we didn't have the package at first.
Mm-hmm.
It was literally just, it's an obstacle course to train these robots. But the package part really like took it to a different level.
Yeah, it's the mechanical bit that made it not just like a run and jump Mario situation. Right?
It's very unique.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's not just get to the end. It's get this thing to the end.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to find it in some levels, figure out where it is, and then once you have it, it's a tool that you can use to navigate and like get around shit. So like it kind of changed everything, but it was because we were thinking about stuff in terms of package delivery because of Crashlands that came up. Had we not made Crashlands and just like made Levelhead next, I don't know what the hell it would have been.
Yeah,
so it's not totally different.
So yeah, so it's not exactly like mechanic first, right? It's the first game was mechanic first, and then after that,
they cross talk.
Yeah, it's this symbiotic kind of thing where it's. I would say it's like mechanics forward, right?
Yeah.
Where that's still kind of like where a lot like the core generation of what's next is.
In the case of Levelhead, it was like we had the platformer stuff, working, and it was like, okay, that's cool, but how do we put something else in here baseline that's available that is differentiating from like a platformer perspective? Mm-hmm. So we asked that question, and then it's like, okay, well, what do we got? Like, what are we doing? Why is this even happening? And that's where you get like shit.
Well, it's the whole idea that like ideas come from past ideas, right? Or it's all mixed together. So whatever we have done before is what's going to provide the setting of like most like. It's basically it's LLM shit, right? It's like we're more likely to make something related to what we have made before, right? As we go, and so like what we're doing is we're just increasing the pool of that thing with each game by basically making stuff in new genres because now we need a lot of new stuff. Like we have to have a lot of new stuff, and because we get bored otherwise, and so we still have to have a lot of like a variety of new stuff each time we do something. But we get this increasing pool. It's like backlog of stuff. And it's just fun. It's fun to be like, let's tie these together somehow. Let's put a connection between these two things, right? To me, like, it's been a lot more fun to have like a through line context of like these all live in the same universe, right? Even when sometimes it's fairly tenuous, but like to me, it's very satisfying for that to be true. To have this like
it makes everything feel big.
It makes the whole thing feel big and important, even when there's a little game like Roid Rampage, right?
Yeah, I think that is very true. I think that the challenge with it, like the one limitation, is basically a tonal one, which is like every so often we've talked about, because we swear a lot, but we don't swear in our games. You know what I mean? The games aren't gory. There's not like swearing happening. And every so often it's like we do. I mean, you want to make something that's like maybe a little darker or whatever else, and it doesn't feel a lot like we'd be able to do that in like the current beer.
Yeah, I think if we started over, I'd be more okay with being a little bit more of ourselves.
Yeah, in
the game. Yeah, and like having the occasional swear word,
or just I don't know. Like there's a lot of those. There's like
to me, it's just hilarious. Like if Flux smashed on the ground and she just goes like, "Oh fuck!" Like for some reason that just is like, hilarious to me. And I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. It's like with all these things, right? It's like
but then it potentially pushes other people out. It'll be like, I don't like that.
Yeah, and you got to be careful limiting your audience when you're not already successful, And
yes.
And in our case, because our success, if we're trying to push past success forward, that means our business partners have certain expectations, our players have certain expectations, right? So, because it's already it was incredibly hard to convince people to like help us out with Crashlands 2, right?
Yeah.
But way easier than trying to convince people to help us out with Levelhead, right? Where basically like while we're staying in a lane where people are like, yeah, I've seen you guys have success there. So we'll put some risk, we'll take on some risk to like do the next thing. But the moment you leave out of that, then now you don't get to rely on your business partners anymore because they're looking at the new thing you're doing and they're like,
the fuck is that?
The fuck is this? And you can't rely on your players anymore because they have certain expectations. So then, so you really, even without the whole gambling the IP away thing, right? If we wanted to like do something really, really different, we would have to have extremely high confidence that thing, whatever it was, stood on its own enough that what we could rely on is the fact that people trust us as a studio that can deliver, which is different than trust as a studio that can make good things, right?
Well, it's a
studio that can deliver and they trust the idea, and that's
or we would have to approach it like just in like a very different way, a business case, which is to more like what we did back in the old days as far as speed, which was like get some fucking prototype of the thing up and out just as soon as possible, get it on itch, like iterate in public with it, launch it within like a couple months because of the risk inherent in it.
Do
Receive it.
Low investment with
Exactly.
lots of market testing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is also we've talked in the past about kind of like the stagnation of film and games, whatever else, which is like everything is a sequel of a reboot of a prequel of a spinoff, and it's because everything's really expensive to make. Like at the quality level that moviegoers want and people watching shows and people playing games, people want like the most top tier graphics and sounds and acting and animations and everything. And all that stuff takes massive teams, huge amounts of time. And at that point, if you also want something creative and new and original, you cannot get anybody to invest in that. You cannot get support. And also like a lot of people are unwilling, players, fans, viewers, whatever, they're unwilling to spend their money on something unfamiliar, And so, like this is why stuff like Balatro happens, right? Which is like no AAA studio would make Balatro. You could not in a million years could you pitch that internally at Blizzard or whatever else, They'd be like, what are we supposed to do with this, right? But one guy can just do it and, sell 10 million copies or whatever. Right?
But it's funny when you then see like the kind of businessy people talking about Balatro, like now that it's already out.
Yeah.
Because you have all these publishers who are like, okay, we need to find like the next Balatro, the next like surprise.
There's a bunch
How do we do it?
But they can't do it because they're going to throw $30 million into it.
Well, they're going to go get something
risks,
that looks like Balatro, but that's how they're going to try to do it, right?
Yeah. And so, and that's also part of the reason too, like we've talked about how, when making Crashlands 2, we knew it was going to be a huge project and like we're only willing to spend that much time on something that's a sequel.
Yes.
Because of this exact issue. If we're making something totally new, then there's no real expectations around what that thing is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to go above and beyond what was there before. It's just its own thing. And it can be whatever we say it is.
We can get a little more weird with it, which is fun.
Yeah. So, and we talked about how we want to transition after Crashlands 2 into making some smaller games, more mid-sized games on a faster turnaround, like our sort of studio origins. And a big reason for that is just, we want to play around for a while. We want to try some cool new ideas and weird things that it's fine if one of them doesn't go, we just want to do some stuff like that. So, all right, that's all the time we have for this week's episode. We'd like to thank our producers, Fat Bard and Sampa DaCosta, for putting the podcast together. And thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, you can just go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the Discord, a way for you to donate to support the podcast, and links to the archives of all the episodes. And if you haven't yet, head on over to Steam, pick up a copy of Crashlands 2, Steam, App Store, and Google Play. And also, if you haven't reviewed it and you haven't playing it,
do it.
Give that thing a good review. It helps us a lot, and it brings more people into the fold. And we appreciate it. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.